Full disclosure here. Just prior to my 8-month hiatus from the channel, I had already broken down Josh Rubin's 2021 horror whodunit, Werewolves Within. But I didn't make it to recording it before I stepped away. Now that the genre rotation has landed on horror again, I thought it was time to give it some wings. Or fangs and claws to keep it thematically relevant. Nevertheless, this quirky and offbeat movie deserves its place in everyone's October marathon of spooky films. The timestamps for each sequence can be found in the comments section for your movie viewing pleasure. Now, let's begin. We start, as always, with a focus on our protagonist, specifically their personality, their inner conflict, and their situation. Dave's secret rendezvous and murder sparks the mystery in town. Then Finn, the wholesome ranger, drives to his new post, and hopefully to a brand new, forceful self. Next, we examine where, why, and how our protagonist exists in their world, with a focus on why they don't quite fit in. Outsider Finn is pulled into the pipeline controversy right away, then meets bubbly postal worker Cecily, who delivers him his first investigation. Then a brief event happens, one that's never happened before. It's destined to lead all the characters away from their status quo. Cecily explains Dave's disappearance, a lie that skews her motives. Which leads us to examine the effect of that something new to the status quo, specifically what's different now and also what remains the same. Cecily gives Finn a quick tour through town, introducing him to the cast of characters we're about to become intimately familiar with. We move along to the discovery that things are less than ideal, or else we explore how badly things are. Both scenarios are common. Cecily sends Finn to deliver a package to a violent recluse, Emerson Flint, who wholesomely de-escalates and flees the situation. Next, our characters dedicate their effort to a specified goal, and this is always smaller in scope than what the third act will demand. Finn tries to get a handle on his situation, from his relationship to his job. Then we run through a brief checklist of the main story elements that we can expect during this journey. Mysterious happenings from an unknown person, and the clashes of personalities and agendas within the small town. Which brings us to the brief event that launches our characters into the wild jungle of the second act. It's also called the oh shit moment. Finn verifies that they're without power and snowed in. Oh shit. We follow our characters as they learn the new rules and expectations of their journey. These are always distinct to the narrative at play. Finn gathers intel and finds the slash generators, and also Dead Dave, officially kicking off the whodunit. Next, our characters showcase their ability to grow and progress, and this is typically an external or physical beat, rather than internal or emotional. The group agrees on recruiting Emerson, of which there are 2 volunteers, while Trisha gathers her own intel, and Dr. Ellis confirms that she's on the case too. Then our characters face legitimate and understandable reasons to deviate from their stated convictions, agendas, or desires. Finn and Cecily navigate a grumpy Emerson, worried about his homicidal temper, while the group descends into suspicions and conspiracies, fracturing their tenuous peace. We endure the anxiety as our characters face an escalation of problems and complications. Emerson rebuffs all attempts to recruit him to act. Chachi's collar is found on the mantelpiece. Then the group descends into dysfunctional chaos. Next, our characters evolve internally or emotionally, and they do this by using elements of the plot or story, which they've gathered and learned so far. Dr. Ellis details the progress of her work, leaning closer to the werewolf truth of it. Then the group squats at Janine's place for the night, finding safety in numbers. Then our journey-weary characters come to terms with their ongoing struggles, Moments and elements from the first act are used to gauge their progress. Pete is dragged out of bed and attacked, as brutally as Dave in the Act 1 opening scene, and the group looks inwardly for the murderer, their Act 1 animosities deepening, which results in a brief event that strikes at our protagonist's core conflict. Dr. Ellis lands on the werewolf truth, and there's no turning back from here. We receive needed answers alongside our characters, which relate to both their external journeys and their internal conflicts. The group endures the rising tensions among them, and no one is to be trusted. Next, our characters complete their smaller scope objective, yet discover that their victory is shallow or altogether meaningless, without also completing a larger scope objective. The group buys into the existence of werewolves, but that doesn't make them any safer. Then our characters face an existential conflict that wounds their sense of self, their worldly identity, or their physical journey. Their tenuous peace dissolves as the conversation switches to money and the pipeline, and everyone holds everyone else at gunpoint. Then they all agree to disarm their tempers and deduce their way to the murderer. We celebrate with our protagonist in light of an undeniable win, which is always related to the rebirth in some way. Finn takes charge and implores the group to be better neighbors, and manages to catch their attention. Next, our characters suffer a grand loss. This is always connected to their newfound inability to quit their journey. Led by Gwen and Marcus, the group separates, taking their lives in their hands. Then we experience a thematic freefall, as the main story elements are ramped up and thrown into upheaval. Finn and Cecily investigate bumps in the night, leading to an interaction that only exists to screw with the audience. Dave's opening scene attack is linked to a larger pattern, and the Wolfson couple are attacked in the woods, which forces us into a brief event that robs our protagonist of seemingly any hope of success. Trisha starts her own murder spree, creating a whole new threat in the chaos. We watch our characters realize that they cannot return to their first act selves, and they turn to face the larger scope objective. Parker dons full hunting gear and looks to act on any hunch he has. Finn, Cicely, and Joaquin stumble onto Marcus killing Pete and robbing the town blind. Trisha continues her campaign of carnage, then Joaquin takes his revenge. Next, our characters use the major swings of the story and their personal journeys to move towards the climax. Joaquin relies on tradition and folklore to catch the werewolf. Then Parker deduces the wrong suspect, like the audience did about 10 times, and Joaquin ends the pipeline temptation with Parker in the middle. Now, the horror genre doesn't normally spend much time on the protagonist after the climax. The final 3 sequences are almost always rushed, so when there's more than a couple minutes of runtime left after the killer is killed, we're in for a treat. Then the final confrontation plays out between our protagonist and characters against the antagonistic force. Cicely helps Finn to safety, who pieces together the real werewolf, and she reveals everything in one hell of a great villain monologue, which culminates in a brief moment where our protagonist finally, and oftentimes metaphorically, overcomes their place in the Act 1 status quo. Finn forcefully, yet politely, stands up for his nice guy persona, telling off a damn werewolf. We experience the direct aftermath of the climax. This can give our characters a moment to reflect on the situation, or else wind down the action with a coda. Cecily transforms into her werebeast persona. Emerson responds to the call for neighborly help, but Cecily isn't so easily defeated. Next, we touch base with additional characters, typically to contrast them against the new status quo. Cecily is stabbed through the neck, and a pained humanity floods back into her eyes. Then we conclude with a tight focus on our protagonist, specifically to contrast them against how we met them at the opening. Finn the newcomer bonds with Emerson the outsider, finding his place in this now ghost town, with Janine watching their backs. And there you have it. Josh Rubin's 2021 claustrophobic horror Werewolves Within adheres perfectly to the 29-point story structure every step of the way. And we use the framework to sniff out a twist ending, or rather a fake ending. Now let's move on from an outed and exposed werewolf to an outed and exposed superhero. Please join me next time for Jon Favreau's 2010 action blockbuster, Iron Man 2. As always, thank you so much for your time. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy this content, and consider commenting on and sharing this video to help the channel find its audience. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll talk at you next time.